This year, unfortunately, not a lot of my students have brought in their own devices. So luckily, our school has provided several classes with mini laptops and different devices. So now I have like a technology station in my classroom. So at the beginning of the year, I wasn't quite sure how to use eClass and not sure everything that you could do with it. And so it's kind of evolved now to where I can give classroom assessments on there. And so one group can be taking an assessment and reading while I'm working with another small group. Students can go on the devices and use e-readers. This is good to kind of differentiate for your lower struggling readers because it can read it to them as well. Another thing I've used technology for is in social studies. Students can present their projects, just record directly on there, give speeches, presentations. I've also used the discussion boards where students can kind of post about things with each other and really engage in a conversation.
Okay, at the beginning of the school year, BYOD was pretty brand new. I didn't have a lot of students with equipment, so taking great advantage of the computer lab worked out. I think the main struggle at the beginning was getting students on there to use it. But I was able to implement different activities where I first showed them how to do it in the classroom, and then we went to the lab together and practiced it. So I was able to integrate math games or educational math games, educational reading, science, social studies, across the whole content area for them to do. And they loved it and they enjoyed it. So every day they wanted to go back and say, what are we doing now? I also, instead of using independent reading books, I found independent reading books that they could use online, ebooks that they could that would read to them, or they could read with partners and work and do the same activity that we would do in the classroom on the lab. So it's been real successful. I've enjoyed it.
Beginning of the year, I wasn't really into it because I didn't think that the kids would be responsible in bringing them, and I thought that it was going to be a hassle as far as them getting on things that they didn't need to or trying to share. So those were some of the struggles with it at first, and then once some of the kids started bringing them, my fears came to light with them having them out when I didn't ask them yet. So just trying to get down the routine of how it was supposed to be read in the classroom was the biggest struggle. Towards the middle and end of the year, I think that it went by a little bit better. More kids started bringing them in once they saw the other kids bringing them in. And I enjoyed it, and it was also helpful to have tablets in the classroom where the kids who did not have their own devices could use the school devices to use. Now that I, see the results, the kids really enjoy it, get to lay down and do work at the same time. I'm looking forward to using it at the very beginning next year.
At the beginning of the school year, my students use their devices mostly for science and sometimes for math. For math, they would use them to videotape themselves, showing what they've learned, and then we would post some of those to the eClass page, and then some of them were used for other kids. They also used it during science, mostly to help them with accessing information off of like ebooks, or sometimes they use the information. They use their BYOD to actually create PowerPoints for some of them that were able to. Many of them had cell phones, so it was harder for them to be able to see the pages that were on like the eClass page or to pull up a book. But most of them, some of them did have tablets, so it made it a little bit easier for them. I switched over and started using it in centers a little bit later on, just because every kid didn't have a device, so I need to run like the technology portion. So once I got extra computers in the classroom, I was able to make it into a complete center where they could use their devices. And they also used them with experiments where they could record what we did as an experiment and share them with each other. Some of the struggles that I saw was that, of course, not every kid had a device, and then pulling some of the apps that I wanted them to use, trying to get access to those apps. Some of the things didn't work. If I put games on my eClass page, for some of them, I guess if they didn't have an Adobe reader or they didn't have some other type of program, it totally didn't work for their device. So that was like some of the struggles that we faced. For the most part, those devices went pretty well.
At the beginning of the year, we didn't have the kids didn't have a lot of resources to bring in their materials, so it made it difficult for us to use technology in the classroom the way that I had planned. But when they began bringing in their devices, it made it a lot easier, and we had more classroom devices to use in small groups. And they really picked up on a lot of the different ways that I was asking them to use the technology, and especially e-class. And then they did very well with, once they really got a hold and grasp of it, they could help the others that were having trouble. So they were very aware of what they were doing and able to teach the other kids to help our small groups run efficiently.
The way I use technology in the classroom is I use the mini labs as a center every day. And what happens is I have 4 separate centers in my classroom, and one group goes to the computers each day. What they do on the computers is classworks, and they also go to the e-class page. The students really enjoy it. They also do Mega Math, and just recently I taught them how to go to my e-class page, so they've been going to the e-class and looking at that too.